Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Women's Soccer Show. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Allie.
And it has been a day. It's only 2:30 for me, and it feels like I have been through it. I don't think I moved off of the couch for 4 hours, and suddenly it was noon. I was in my pajamas, and I was in a full sweat. What a match day 2, Allie.
Yeah, it's definitely Olympics after darking.
Hashtag Olympics. Olympics after dark. All right, everybody. In case you're wondering, we are here to talk match day 2 of the group stage of the women's football tournament of the 2024 Paris Olympics. And today it's going to be a little bit of a different format than it was when we covered match day 1. Allie, you want to tell everybody what we're going to get into today?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we like to mix it up, keep it fresh for you. So instead of going through every game and the groups, we are picked 3 fantastic games for you to cover a little bit more in depth. We were trying to do one from each group, but Group A just didn't cut it. So we've got 2 games from Group B.
Why do you say it in the negative way? Or you could just say, oh, Group B had 2 incredible games we just had to cover. So let's get into it. Let's do news first because... Listen, we might be shooting ourselves in the foot because we knew when we recorded the last episode, we were like, we're going to do the most up-to-date news on the drone scandal. And that, of course, within like the 12 hours in between recording and putting it out, so much news broke. So we'll say this is, as of Sunday night UK time, the latest drone scandal news. And there's a lot of it. So first and foremost, Canada have been deducted 6 points, so they start at a -6 in this tournament. That was the first punishment, I'll say, that came down. And since then, there's been quite a bit. Officially, FIFA suspended Bev Priestman, head coach from Canada, and both assistant coaches, or one assistant coach and the analyst that were involved in the scandal, and all 3 of them are suspended until investigations are done.
Also, Canada have been fined, I think it works out about 200,000 Swiss francs.
That hurts for a federation that doesn't want to put their money into their women's team.
Yeah, I was going to say that one probably hurts quite a bit more.
I'll also say, I mentioned the women's team, but I think an important piece of information that has come out is that this is not just a women's national team problem for Canada.
No, this is a Canada problem.
I think maybe what's most important here is Bev Priestman, current suspended head coach for Canada, put out a statement, and some former players have as well put out their own statements. And I think it's important maybe that we read some of those or some of the most important pieces from those and share that with everybody listening, Allie. All right, so first and foremost, Amy Walsh, a former women's national team player. She now hosts a podcast in Canada called Footy Prime. I'm going to read a direct quote from her because I think she just said it so well, it's not even worth me paraphrasing. She said, quote, "This is awful, worst case scenario. I feel sick to my stomach, genuinely nauseated. I understand when you get to a high level, people will be ruthless and do whatever they can to gain a competitive advantage, but this is far over the line. The players are benefiting from coaches cheating. There's a certain amount of blind trust players have that coaches are doing things the right way, and this is the ultimate betrayal." Really well said. I mean, Allie, we touched on last week how the players are like the collateral damage in this, and I think she phrased that perfectly.
We're having conversations, and I think they're the ones I feel the most sorry for because they thought they were doing everything the right way. So Bev's statement specifically over the FIFA sanctions, I'm not going to read it all, but it's pretty much saying that I'm absolutely heartbroken for the players. I'd like to apologise from the bottom of my heart for the impact this situation has had on all of them. I plan to take accountability and I cooperate with the investigation. She then apologises to Canada as a whole about how it's become her home, and she's sorry that she's let them down, and that the programme did win their medal on merit and grit and determination, despite what everybody else is saying, and that she's going to be cheering from afar and show the world what they're made of.
Yeah, the interesting part for me is when she basically said that she wishes she could say more, but she will refrain at this time because of the processes that are going on.
Yeah, so that's intriguing to me, because I'm like, what do you mean by that? What do you know, Bev Priestman?
Yeah, well, we talked about last time about how she hasn't outright come out and said, I did not know about this. So that's an interesting little piece to add on. All right. On from dronegate, onto something a little bit more fun. One of our most favorite things to cover in the World Cup was what, Allie?
Waru, the German koala mascot that was crocheted by Clara Ball. It's my favorite thing.
And we have a mascot. We have a mascot for the Olympics now. Any update on the Germany mascot? Again, crocheted by Clara Buell.
Yes, so it's an otter, and we reported that it was going to be an otter, and we didn't understand why that had anything to do with France. It still has nothing to do with France, except for the fact it's wearing a striped shirt and it has a beret, and it's called Otin. So that's what we know.
Allie, do you
about
have
this.
photos? Do you have photos of that we can post?
I will put some stuff on socials, but it's very adorable. It is very adorable, but mainly because it's got a beret.
All right, so let's do it. We're going to rip through scores from all of the groups, a couple standing scenarios, and then we're going to get into the games.
So, the games of Group A. Canada took it 2-1 over France, and Colombia beat New Zealand 2-0.
Over to Group B, Australia took the 3 points over Zambia in a thrilling 6-5 win, and the USA beat Germany 4-1.
And then in Group C, Spain managed to eke out a 1-0 win over Nigeria, and Japan took it 2-1 over Brazil.
And finally, we're not going to get into all of the standings because officially nobody has been eliminated, but we feel like it's worth noting because we just covered the drone scandal and the fact that Canada started at -6 points. Because Canada have now won 2 games, they're sitting at 0 points. They'll play Colombia in their final match. And if they win, they could end up advancing as high as 2nd place with those 3 points. But they need the win. And that would be absolutely wild.
So let's kick off with some games. As we mentioned up at the top, Group A, we were going to cover some, but the Group B games were far too good to pass up. Just very quickly, as we mentioned, Canada took it 2-1 from France. Game wasn't the most thrilling of games. They both play very similarly, so it was very, cat and mouse games. So it's Gilles who took it in the very dying moments to make it 2-1, and also the French goalkeeper got took out by her own defender. So we will keep you updated on how she's doing and whether her tournament is over or if it was just a bit of a knock and she'll be back for the final game. And then the other Group A game was New Zealand-Colombia. Colombia took it 2-0. Again, Colombia looking really strong, even without Ramirez after that red card. People noticed that they did hold up her jersey when they scored, which was quite a sweet touch. And they are looking exciting. We talked about the fact that Canada need to beat them, but I do think it's going to be an epic game because Colombia won't go down easy based on the performances we've seen in the last few games. So let's move on to Group B with the most thrilling games probably of the tournament so far, and we're going to start off with that absolute goal fest, which was Australia versus Zambia. The final score on that one was 6-5 to Australia, who were actually trailing Zambia for most of the game. It wasn't until like the last 15 minutes that they managed to claw it back. And this game was so wild. Like, we had a little group chat going and it was like so many notifications on this game.
It was heartbreaking. I mean, at the end of the day, it was heartbreaking. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I was pulling so hard for Zambia in that game. And I know it's kind of weird to say a team deserved to win because at the end of the day, like if you won the game, you probably deserved to win the game. But you just can't help but feel so bad for this team that's been through so much, and they at one point were up by 2 goals to Australia. It really did look like they were going to hold on. Australia got, in my opinion, a lucky penalty kick to get them within 1, and then it really just came down to benches and depth, and Zambia did not have the depth and the fresh legs to keep it going and slowly just disintegrated into chaos. But you have to give it up for them. I mean, I was heartbroken, but this game was wild. I think most of the time I was texting that group chat, Allie, just LOL. Just like all caps, LOL.
Yeah.
Like, what is going on right now?
Yeah, so we just finished watching the Brazil-Japan game when Tim, friend of the pod, just messaged us and went, Zambia 1-0 up. And I was like, it's been a minute. It's literally been a minute. Turns out it was 40 seconds. That's all it took for Barbara Banda to score the first goal, and then we knew we were in for something.
So, fun stat on that, Barbara Banda's goal versus Australia, that first one, because she had 3, is the second fastest goal in women's Olympic football history. The first one goes to Janine Becky. That was versus Australia in the Rio Olympics at 20 seconds, which is wild. But yeah, Barbara Banda had a hat trick in the game. Another fun fact, that was her 3rd ever hat trick in the 5 Olympic games that she has ever played in. She had 2 in the Tokyo Olympics, in the 3 Zambia games that they played. And now she's got 1 in the 2024 Olympics. She is, I know this is going to sound so cheesy, but like, she is a revelation. And I'm so happy that the world is getting to see her right now, because I think not a lot of people noticed her in Tokyo, even though she had 2 hat tricks across 3 games, because I don't think a lot of people ended up tuning into Zambia games, at least in this country, to be totally frank. And now people have really taken notice because she's a star in the NWSL. But again, not everybody watches the NWSL. So for her to be doing this on the world stage and against the Matildas, who just hosted the World Cup, finally, I think this is the moment she becomes the household name that she really deserves to be, because, oh my goodness. And it's not just the goals, it's the assists as well coming from her. She is something special.
Yeah, no, this game was something insane. I was sat watching with friends and they just looked at me and went, did the defenders not want to play? Is that what's happening today? Is it just like the defenders don't want to play? Because it felt so attack heavy, and I would say Australia's, most of their goals came from defensive mistakes by Zambia. They didn't defend set pieces well at all. And Australia's defenders didn't want to track back and didn't want to offer protection to their goalkeeper.
I mean, I fully agree. Zambia shot themselves in the foot, unfortunately. The reality of this situation is that a lot of those goals, like you said, could have been prevented, including one that just broke my heart that went right through the goalkeeper's hands and into the net. We knew this was going to be a goal fest of sorts, because we talked about in the previews even, these are 2 teams with explosive offenses and lacking defenses, both for different reasons, but that's how it lines up. And I think anytime you pit 2 teams with no defense and good offense against each other, it's pretty simple. You're going to get a goal fest. But I don't think this is what we expected. What took it from 50%, this is exciting, it's a goal fest, to this might be one of the craziest soccer games I've ever watched in my life?
I think it was the fact that it was 4-2 at half time. And I was like, I don't understand what happened. I think that was it. It was like, I just don't understand what happened half the time.
Yeah, I do think everybody was just sitting in shock. I think there was no room to breathe either. And I think partially what shot Zambia in the foot is also why there was no room to breathe, is that they would score and then they'd immediately concede. Like within a minute, Australia would score again.
Yeah, I think Zambia, their biggest problem, and it's a problem they've had through all of their games so far, is they go too hard too fast. And that is their biggest problem, is the fact that I don't know if it's because they feel like they're underdogs, so they want to get out of the gate as quickly as possible. And we saw it this game. They did really well. Like, they were 3-1 up, and then it was 3-2, and then 4-2 at half time. And you're like, yep, they've absolutely nailed this on. But then they've got nothing left in the tank for the second half. And it doesn't matter what substitutes you have, if your core, 8 players that you're keeping on don't have anything left in the tank, then you're sunk. Whereas you look to Australia gave everything. We were talking about Gori, and I'm not just saying it because she's a West Ham player, but there wasn't a blade of grass that she didn't touch. But then they managed to give her the break and then change things around and move things around, because they have that bench and those pieces to do so. And that is, I think, Zambia's biggest takeaway at all, I think, from this entire tournament, is they need to start learning how to pace themselves. Because once they learn that, they are going to be such a force to be reckoned with on the world stage. Or they already are, but defensively is the thing they need to work on. But if they work out how to pace themselves and just play the game, slow it down, because it just feels like it's boom, 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 boom all the time until there's nothing left to do.
I think that's a really good point. I think that aligns pretty perfectly as well with what I said, that I feel like Zambia lost because of depth. And it's one or the other, right? That you either have the depth so that you can go at that pace that you just mentioned, Allie, or you don't have the depth, but you slow your pace down. Like, again, you just mentioned, Allie. And they went at that fast pace, but they did not have the depth for it in the fresh legs. And at the end of the day, I think when Australia started putting fresh legs on the field around the 60th minute, you could tell there was a shift in the game. And from there on out, I mean, starting in the 58th minute, Australia scored, and then they scored back to back to back after that. It went Zambia goal. Let's go from the start because this is wild. We have to just go Zambia goal, Australia goal, Zambia goal, Zambia goal number 3. Then it goes Australia goal, Zambia goal, followed by 4 Australia goals to close the game out. And I think that honestly might tell the whole picture of the game because it was back and forth, but it was Zambia's. And then at the end, they just fully ran out of steam. Listen, I feel like it's worth talking about a little bit about Australia more in depth for a moment because this is a team that I've got to call you out, Allie. You had going first in this group.
Lies. I have no because this is the same as the USA group. I have the USA going first. I have Australia going second.
Okay, I'm so sorry. You have them going second. I'm so sorry.
I know I have some stupid opinions sometimes, and I've never lived down the Iceland comment. But please don't put stupid opinions in my mouth.
Fair enough. Do you want me to say that again, or should we keep it?
We're keeping this because I want it on record that I am not stupid all the time, and Sarah just doesn't listen.
I genuinely think that came from I was so shocked that you had Australia going second that in my mind it felt like you had them going first. Does that make sense? That was the level of shock I was. Okay, but anyways, we do have to spend a moment on them because the Tillies, they got knocked out of the World Cup in the semifinals, and this is not the same team that we saw. And we spoke in the previews about how the Matildas actually had finally learned how to fare without Sam Kerr. And we spoke keep wanting to say last week, but we spoke, 3 days ago after match day 1 about how they're dealing with some injuries here and there. They don't have a ton of players at 100%, but this game can't be pinned on that. We have to talk about Australia and really what's going on with them because they look like a different team than last summer.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy because I think the problem is so much focus was on, what they're going to do with that Sam Kerr, who's going to score. That's not a problem. We saw that today. That's not a problem. But defensively is shocking. It is, and it wasn't like that in the World Cup, unless I've got dream remembering of the home nation, but it wasn't like that in the World Cup. They had great shoutouts. We remember that penalty shootout with France that Maka saved some insane penalties.
We'll forever remember it. And I'm happy to talk about it whenever, as often as we can bring it up, really.
But it's true, though, and the back line was perfect, and they were listening to each other, and it just feels like this time round, I don't know who's missing. I don't know if they're so disconnected because it's technically now their off-season and they're playing a tournament. I don't get it, but it is not, it's like nothing is working from the 6 backwards, and I don't know what it is, and I don't understand.
All right, should we end this on a fun fact? Because we talked a lot about Barbara Banda, and as we should, but I'll also just shout out, I thought Rachel Kundananji had one of the best games I've seen her play. She's one of the most expensive players in the world who has not put a lot of goals away for Bay FC in the NWSL. She came through in this game. Yes, she had a couple more opportunities where she could have finished more, but whatever. Deserves a shout. She played fantastic. But let's end it on this fun fact about the one and only Barbara Banda, because this is shocking. Here we go. Barbara Banda has more Olympic goals than Alex Morgan and is only 1 goal behind Abby Wambach in her total number of goals already.
That's crazy because this is only her 2nd Olympics.
Exactly.
That is mental. That is absolutely mental. So we are continuing with Group B, and the other match was the USA versus Germany. The USA took it 4-1. I was watching another game and then I switched it over on Sarah's assistance, and I think I got the rotten half. I don't think I got the best half of the match. I think everything happened on the first half. But it was such a statement by the USA. it showed, in my opinion, and I'll let Sarah talk because I know she's going to wax lyrically on this, but I think it showed for me the weaknesses we'd been talking about in Germany. We've been talking about Germany's lack in the midfield and the plays, like they were doing all right in the wings but couldn't really run it through because of what Oberdorf does, and that's who they were missing. And this game was a peak example of everything we said about Germany. But credit where credit's due, it was a good performance by the USA.
I agree. Maybe let's start there, though. Let's start with Germany. Because also it needs to be noted, this game was on directly after the Australia-Zambia game. And when I tell you, I flipped the channel to see Alyssa Nair come up big in a 1v1 opportunity. And I was like, I literally can't handle this right now. I was wearing my Apple Watch. It told me I was working out. I was like, this is too much for me. All right, so let's do a moment on Germany because I want to start kind of like maybe with that, Allie, because I think people fell into two different camps after Germany's first game because they had a big result in game number 1 that I think led half of people to believe Germany's back. Last year was a fluke in the Olympics when they went out in the group stages and Germany just put on a performance and they made a statement. And then half of the people fell into the camp that I fell into, which was, listen, I'm still not fully convinced by that because they weren't, and we talked about this again, Allie, they were not challenged in a way that we got to see how they would deal with the missing Lena Oberdorf. They were not challenged in that holding center mid position in a defensive capacity. And they were in this game by the one and only Rose Lavelle. And she exploited it.
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. And I definitely came into the second camp in the fact that I was like, they were playing Australia, and that for me was, yeah, it was a good result, but against Australia, let's see what they can do in the US side of things. And yeah, for me it was, I don't think they're back. I still think they're facing the issues.
They're definitely facing that issue, but quite frankly, that to me was their only weak spot. You look at how organized they were along their low to mid block, because a lot of the time you could see when the U.S. were possessing the ball, because in the U.S. new style of play, they possess the ball in the attacking third, and it's lovely to see. But when they were, you could see the lines of Germany set up the back and the midfield line, and it was very classic German defending. They were dangerous on the attack. I think for me, it's that defensive element of Lena Oberdorf when spaces get opened up, like when the U.S. could really open up and play quickly on the transition. That's when you could tell most that Oberdorf was not there, paired with the fact that Pop was nowhere to be found in this game. And everything did seem to fall on the shoulders of Schuler, of Nuskin, of Gvin. Gvin is like a defensive winger, and she was essentially like the biggest attacking threat that Germany presented in this game. And that's a problem if you're Germany and your defensive winger is like your biggest attacking threat. Those two things to me are like the only glaring points. I don't think that this is Germany of last year. I still think they're going to go far in this tournament. The U.S. put on a fantastic performance. And I do think that actually Germany will take this, learn from it, and be a tougher opponent in the knockouts.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there was definitely some pacing issues with Germany, which, like we said, they just couldn't handle. Rose Lavelle, you saw it when Lynn Williams came on. If they've got a pacey player, they just haven't worked out. Like you said, Pop was non-existent, Schuler was non-existent.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, this is weirdly like more convincing for Germany than their last game was. Even though they won the previous game, this game was more convincing to me because they looked like they could really put a complete game together against a strong opponent. And you said it, pace did really kill them. It's funny because we just talked about Australia. Maybe there's a good way to transition into the US, but I think maybe the last note on Germany is their back line is very similar to Australia's in the sense that they have two very speedy outside backs. I know you guys don't like that term outside back, but I'm going to use it right now. They have a speedy left back and a speedy right back. And then they have like older, slower, but veteran center backs. And that center back pairing actually got broken up in the middle of the game in the second half. One of them got pulled off because they just couldn't keep pace with that dynamic front line of the US that we'll come on to. So I'm glad you pointed that out. I think that was another glaring hole that perhaps next time if they do come up, I mean, they're playing Zambia next. Maybe they're going to try something else in the center back pairing against that Barbara Banda speed.
I think they're going to have to. I genuinely think they're going to have to, because as we saw with Zambia in the Zambia-Australia game, they really like playing on the wing, Zambia. They like the flank, and they play that with such an aggressive passion and pace that Germany are going to get ripped apart, because they're not going to be able to handle Banda. They're not going to be able to handle the other strikers and forwards of Zambia. And if your centre-back pairing getting split like Moses and the Red Sea, and all is your final frontier is Berger, who did make some good saves against you guys, but was still not quite 100% there and fit, then it could lead to,
that
Germany's
would be
downfall,
wild.
because they may
but truly,
third.
again, Group B, anything can happen. The US are taking on Australia. Germany is taking on Zambia. Anything's up for grabs right now. Should we move on to the US quickly? This was the best performance I've seen the US put together in a very, very long time. Would you agree with that, Allie?
I would say so. I would say that it was definitely. I did miss the first half, but I've watched I quickly scanned through the first half before we jumped onto recording, and I would say so. I think you guys have. It feels less like 11 different team members, which is what it felt like in the World Cup and in like friendlies and stuff like that. It felt very much like the USA best 11, but just that, and there was no communication and there was no pull. Whereas I'm seeing more with the youngsters that are being brought in, and it seems to be less relying on favourites and personalities. There are still some players that we can talk about that I would admit, but that's just me. But I think you're definitely seeing that link-up play, especially between like Swanson, Smith and Rodman. Lavelle, again, is an absolute revelation in midfield, as we all know her to be. I thought she was fantastic in this game. It's probably the best game I've seen Rose play since she's come back from injury. If I'm honest, I think that was probably way up there for Lavelle. I think Sonnet, again, is the answer to a lot of your problems sometimes.
Interesting. I don't know where to start. Maybe I'll start with the Sonnet comment, because it does need to be said. Unfortunately, Tierna Davidson went down in the second half. Tierna Davidson has struggled with an ACL injury, with a torn Achilles. Like, this poor woman has struggled massively, injury after injury, and finally makes her way back onto the U.S. women's national team, is in the starting back four. Game number 2, she goes down. They said it was a lower leg injury. We don't know exactly what it is, how serious it is, but fingers crossed, because, I mean, that would be huge. This is finally the U.S. have cemented that new center back pairing in Davidson and Girma, and for Davidson to go down, it makes a big difference. Yes, Emily Sonnet came on and she played pretty well, but there's no replacing when you lose a center back that you have been training with. It's like frankly, it feels like losing a goalkeeper. There's a reason you don't really sub off your center backs. And it does change some of the dynamics of the team. I thought Sonnet played really well, though, coming on into that position. And frankly, I think the two things that need to be said, you commented on Rose Lavelle, so I don't even need to restate that, because I feel like you said that well. We've talked about that midfield. She is so key in there. Listen, that front three is special. I think that's also what we need to talk about, because that front three of Rodman, Smith, and Swanson, I don't even know what other word to use for them other than special. This is a front three for the ages. And if I was any team, I've said this before, I'm going to continue to say it, I would be most scared to go against those three. The speed at which they move, the creativity with which they play, how dynamic they are, and the way they know each other's movements so well. It's gorgeous to watch. It really is.
No, absolutely. And I don't want to just say negative things for the sake of it, but I will just say one thing. I think it is time now for Haran to hand over the armband. We've talked about this in our personal chats. We've never really talked about it in the pod. I actually think Girma is ready to be captain now. I saw it when she took over in the first game in that half. She's just got that, even though she's young, she's got that level-headed presence about her. And Haran slows your game down. And I was watching, granted I only saw the second half, but I'm watching game where like Rose is playing some brilliant hold-up football and she's got Rodman coming up to her. And then when Williams came on, she had Williams with her and everything else. And Haran was so off pace for you guys. And I'm like, it's just not working. And I'm not saying Haran shouldn't be there. She could be a great super sub, but we should now be starting the transition of transitioning her out the captaincy and Germa in. But what do I know?
I do think that's the plan in the long run for Emma Hayes. I really do. And I'll also say that, yeah, some opportunities that Germany had were purely because Lindsay Horan held onto the ball for too long. Like, plain and simple, that's it. We've talked about the midfield. We don't have to harp on it. I love Sam Coffey. I think she's great at the number 6. That wasn't her best game. Rose Lavelle was really holding down a lot of that midfield for the U.S., both offensively and defensively. And I guess maybe to just end on this for the U.S., because in the larger picture, we've talked about the U.S. so much. And it's been, oh my God, I can't even begin to get into the commentary that we've heard and had to discuss about the U.S. But it's beautiful to have a direction. There's a style of play and there's a direction that it's headed in. And that's, weirdly, as simple as that sounds, not something that the U.S. women's national team has had. I don't think even since they won the World Cup in 2019. Like, it's been that long. So just that makes my heart really happy. And right now, the rest is gravy.
Have you checked out Total Football Analysis yet? TotalFootballAnalysis.com provides researched analysis on loads of football, including the women's game. Want all the stats in one place instead of drowning in a mountain of tabs? Want to explore key matchups and the tactics from both teams? Total Football Analysis provides the stats and analysis to help you learn more about the beautiful game. We have a special discount for listeners of the Women's Soccer Show. At checkout, type WOSO10 to get a full year for just €10. That's €40 of the yearly subscription. Head over to TotalFootballAnalysis.com and type WOSO10 at checkout.
And to our final game in Group C, it was Japan versus Brazil. And this was a game that didn't really do much in the first half and then did everything in the second half, and it ended up with Japan taking it 2-1. And I think I can sum up with the first half was just slow. It was just so slow. We were messaging back and forth, and I was like, I am a little bored right now.
I believe I wrote snooze fest.
Yeah, it wasn't a great first half, and then the second half, it went a bit mental.
Yeah, I can pretty much sum up how I feel tactically about this game and what made it such a snooze fest in the first half in one sentence, and that's the fact that nobody was exploiting the wings. It was one-dimensional. Both teams were just going forward, down the middle, and that's why nobody was really able to score at half. It was 0-0 at halftime. You have to open up the field. Everybody was just going where all of the defenders were, and it was not it made for a very sloppy first half, I'll say.
Yeah, and to be honest, the sloppiness didn't really get any better in the second half. I think the 3 goals that were scored were, they were some great goals. The penalty was a bit naff, but they were some great goals, but it didn't come out of any great play, really. And that's what's disappointing. And we talked about it last time about whether this is Brazil are coming back because of that performance against Nigeria. And I'm going to be honest, this just cemented to me that Brazil still have so much more work to do.
Yeah, I think both of us said we weren't convinced by them last week. And then again, still not convinced by them this week. I think it's unfortunate because Japan took it 2-1, and for a very long time it looked like Brazil was going to win it 1-0. So it was unfortunate for them to let go of those 3 points. I believe Japan equalized on a penalty kick that was awarded from a VAR reviewed handball. And then it was just a wild final goal that Japan scored in the last moment. But I'd agree, unconvincing still from Brazil. I thought they had a beautiful goal. For some reason here, Ludmila did not get the start for Brazil today. And when she came on in the second half, everything changed. It went from a one-dimensional team to opening up the wings. She opened up the wings, and they scored that goal from Marta, who, at almost 40 years old, is holding down this team.
I was going to say, it all went to hell for Brazil when Marta went off. And you actually saw her like with her head in her hands, because Marta got subbed off, and I get it, maybe she can't do a full 90 anymore. I don't agree with that, but maybe the coach thinks she can't do a full 90 anymore. And that's when Brazil lost all direction. The assist and the movement for their goal all came from Marta. It was beautiful. And she was the one that was going after the Japanese players and was going after the defenders and causing them problems. And as soon as he took her off, Brazil lost all direction. And that allowed Japan, who were already knocking, they were already coming at them after going 1-0 down, to have that confidence to do so.
I don't know if it's... I think that they know she can go full 90. I think they're trying to save her because it is such a grueling tournament. But it's a delicate balance, because if you save her a little too much, there's not going to be any games to save her for, because Brazil need to win so that they can advance. And yeah, Marta in that midfield, I was saying that goal, it came from Marta holding up play in the midfield, allowing her players to get forward, turning, playing a beautiful ball to Ludmila, who passed it on to Jennifer, who ultimately scored. But the way Marta's really helping this team is with that hold-up play in the midfield. She's turning them from a transition team into a team that can hold the ball up, get set, and then play their offensive set. And it's so special to get to watch her still shine in the final time we'll get to see her on the Olympic stage. And I will say, I hope that Ludmila played her way into the starting lineup, because Brazil are a better team when she's on the field.
Over to the victors, Japan. Again, first half was snooze fest, was Joel. They didn't really wake up until they went 1-0 down. And then that's when we started to see the technical brilliance of Japan that I've been talking about, and sort of like the game we saw against Spain. They were passing much better. Tanaka, apart from that awful penalty, because they got awarded 2 penalties, the first one was absolutely diabolical, was brilliant for them and was really such a bright light. Yui Hasegawa was, again, phenomenal in their midfield. And the thing I have to say about Japan is, the problem is like you said, they kept trying to go through the middle, which is not going to work with certain teams. And they've got Nigeria next, and it's really not going to work with Nigeria, because Nigeria have such a brilliant right side. They play on that right flank all the time, and it was something that almost caught Brazil out when they played, and just they couldn't quite exploit it. And I think if Japan keeps staying as compact and in the middle as they have been, Nigeria is going to exploit them on the right side, and they're just going to, again, screw up their chances of progressing.
I couldn't agree more with your call-out players, especially your mention of Mina Tanaka. She was, without a doubt, the center of the offense on this team. Listen, I thought that Japan looked best in the first 10 minutes of the game and the last 10 minutes of the game. The first 10, they were high pressing. It was like they were doing to Brazil what Spain had done to them. And then they kind of laid off. And that makes sense, because high pressing for 90 minutes is an absurd idea fitness-wise. You got to pick your moments, and they picked the first 10. And it worked. They started the game strong. They should have gone up 1-0 at the front of the game. But this is a team that plays a pretty defensive formation, a 5-3-2. They play a 5-back. So for them to also be kind of like a transition-based team is a lot for those wing backs to really run the field. I think that Japan as a whole are playing their game well. And what needs to continue to go right for them is converting their opportunities. Defense is not the issue here. They've got the 5-back, they're set, and they're going to get few and far between opportunities, and they need to continue to convert them like they did here.
So the next and final group games will be kicking off on the 31st of July, and it is key to note that each of the group games will be kicking off at the same time to avoid, the pulling, tanking it as we suspected Spain did in the World Cup to get a more favourable draw to the final. So Group A, Canada will be taking on Colombia, and New Zealand will be taking on France.
Group B, Australia versus the United States and Zambia versus Germany.
And then finally, Group C, we have Spain versus Brazil, and Japan will be taking on Nigeria.
This is wild. Like, so much could happen here, and we're going to get our bracket at the end of Wednesday. I feel like we're already like halfway through the tournament. Is that wrong?
Yeah,
we're like a third of the way through the tournament.
With no round of 16, go straight into the quarters. Just as it started, it's ending.
Just as I say that, though, I will say a final piece of news. Everybody's been petitioning the Olympic Committee to add more teams to the women's football tournament because there are more teams in the men's football tournament in the Olympics than women. And it recently broke that the Olympic Committee said, no, that would cost too much money. So we're stuck in this structure, everybody, for the foreseeable future. But that's okay, because we'll see you on Thursday. Again, games Wednesday. We'll see you for the Match Day 3 episode on Thursday. And for the Women's Soccer Show, I've been Sarah.
And I've been Allie.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.
This podcast was edited by Monkey Hill Media. Visit monkeyhillmedia.com for more information.